Welcome back to the Inspiration Station where stories spark action. I'm your host, Mr. U. Wherever you are and have you listening to this show, thanks for making us part of your week. We're live on YouTube and Facebook. And of course, you can find all of our shows across all social media brands and podcast listening platforms. Thanks again for making us part of your week. In studio with us today, lead coaching coordinator for the College of Charleston Life Design Coaching Center, also the founder of the Initiation Source and an author of Sincerely America. Benjamin Lee is with us. Benjamin, good to see you, brother. How are you, man?
I am quite well. How are you doing today?
Doing fantastic, man. So good to see you. It's so good to have you here. We are local to each other, man, so I'm excited about that. That really happened for me, man. So I'm good. I'm really good with this. This is pretty awesome to have you in here and you're in the same place I am. So that's pretty cool, man. All right, so let's jump in, man. You got a long history of things that you've done. I love that. I used to be what I consider a jack of all trades. My wife said, stop saying that about yourself. So I had to kind of change my mantra a little bit, but I've been in a lot of places, done a lot of things, kind of like how you have. What do you say to the person who felt their identity was in the things that they've done, and when their life fell apart, they no longer knew who they were anymore? Can you relate to that? Can you speak to that to those that may be listening who have felt that same way? Did that ring a bell? Did I hit the mark at all?
Not only do I relate to that, but that is the foundation of my entire journey is navigating life thinking that I have things figured out, and then just being self-aware enough to pay attention to the points in my life where I'm meeting resistance or something feels out of alignment with myself. And that falls back just on having the courage to be able to say that you're wrong. Because I see a lot of people who will spend their entire lives bashing their head against a single path. And you look and it's like, brother, you're causing your own misery. What are you doing here? And I have found myself in that same exact position. So it's just to answer your question. Yes, I have found myself being that jack of all trades, but I'm infinitely grateful for that because it's given me the flexibility to really chase what makes me passionate and find what aligns with me and not have to continue to live a life that I don't want to live.
I love that, but I gotta ask because I know I have my own story. Many people who are friends of mine in this podcasting industry, if you will, with me, and other areas where I form relationships. What was the pivot point where you decided to start creating the life you wanted to have and not doing the one that was, I guess, expected or normal or comfortable for you? What was the pivot point that got you to start crafting the life that you wanted, or that you were passionate about, like you said?
Oddly, the pivot point for me, the catalyst for the pivot happened about 4 years before I became conscious of the fact that is what I was doing. So mine actually came from a really bad breakup that really challenged like how I was showing up in the world. It bruised my ego. It challenged the way that I was relating to the people around me, my family, everything. And upon reflection of that entire situation, the only information that I came out the other side understanding was that I was the reason that all of that went wrong. And I tried everything in the book to make it somebody else's fault. But at the end of the day, I had to look myself in the mirror and say, no, you are the reason that you just lost the thing that you wanted. And so for a few years, I was unconsciously making the changes that I thought that I had to make to be worthy of that thing that I just lost. And it wasn't until, God, it could have been relatively less than a year ago is when I really consciously understood like, oh, this is what I am doing. I am now living an intentional life. I am choosing to show up every day in a certain way and change the narrative and the script and that story that I tell myself about myself. And now I'm really the writer of the play that I'm performing in. Whereas before I was just performing some subconscious version of a play that somebody else wrote for me 30, 40 years ago. So really, it's been a pretty recent development. About a year ago is when that intentionality kicked in, but the catalyst happened a few years before the consciousness of that situation kicked in.
Makes sense. Your time as a combat vet, I know that it it impacted you in ways that you probably couldn't describe fully, I'm sure. I know that when you're out of the uniform, a lot of people struggle with who they are and who they want to be, and trying to figure out the whole identity thing. I know it's low hanging fruit to ask somebody like yourself, what lessons can you take from that? I want to ask you about everything that you've done. I'm talking about, dealing with addiction, your work in general contracting, electrician, being a college student, an author, a coach. Now you're coaching coaches, a podcast host, if I'm not mistaken on that one, entrepreneurship, combat vet. What would you say out of all these areas is the one that provided the biggest lesson for you that you still live today or you still walk out today?
Wow, that's a great question. Wow. I would actually say that the thing that has probably most informed how I show up in the world today is my experience with addiction. So it wasn't a vocation or education or a career. It was the darkness that I had to confront within myself to release myself from the chains of addiction. And a lot of people in recovery, they focus so much on the substance that has a hold of them. But I mean, I have 11 years sober now, so I'm well out the other side. Thank you. But being very intentional and self-aware, I have realized that freeing myself of opiates all those years ago, that wasn't the final step in the process, because the void inside of myself that I was trying to fill just changed the mask that it was wearing. So it would go from drinking in the military to opiates after I got out of the military. But then once I got clean from opiates, then I found myself overusing Adderall to be productive in careers that weren't aligned with me. And then marijuana to zone out, or too much caffeine or nicotine or whatever it was. My addictive personality was this attempt to numb myself from the feelings that I needed to feel in order to grieve and let go of the things that I was still holding on to. But confronting that, I don't like using the word weakness, but confronting that old pattern was one of the hardest things that I ever had to do. So addiction is definitely the thing that has most informed who I am today.
That's probably one of the most transparent answers that I think I've ever heard in that vein. So that you would being so open to that. One of the things I learned from your story is that you spent a lot of your early career in the military doing dangerous things in dangerous parts of the world. When you add an addictive personality to it, I can't imagine what that would have looked like. But I think one thing you did was your job was to locate explosives, if I got that correct. Tell me, you're not doing it now, obviously, and you're not dealing with the addictive personality anymore. You've dealt with that. So what do you think is the difference in who you are as a person after having done those kind of things? Because there's something about that kind of drives you. And this is a long question, so forgive me, but I'm trying to get it out of my head so it can make sense to you. It's like this. For me, I grew up loving crime dramas and mysteries. There was something in me that was prone to want to be a part of that, to solve the mystery, to find the answer. You did that job and did it so well. You excelled at it for a reason. There was something about you that made you excel at that. Does that make sense so far, Benjamin? I want to make sure I'm not losing you before I ask the question. Okay. So what do you think has changed, if anything, about who you are as a person from doing that, and the reasons why you decided that that's something you want to do and you enjoy so much? Does that make sense?
It very much does. And the answer to this is a little bit nuanced. So bear with me as I give you a long explanation. But the thing that made me such a good bomb squad technician was my incessant need for validation. And I developed that early on in my childhood because I never felt seen or loved or connected to. And weirdly, having that higher purpose of saving lives and protecting property and keeping people safe, it fed this narrative that I told myself of my inflated ego. Like, look at all these things you're doing. Look at all these lives you're saving. Look at all these combat missions that you're performing. And it really was fueling that need, my own self need to be important and to be validated, because I derived almost all of my self-worth from my productivity, the things that I did outside in the world. And what's funny is throughout the years, really facing my shadow, I realized that I have a natural part of me that loves being the protector, loves being the mediator, the person who can hold things together for other people. But what's really changed is the why behind that motivation. So before, it was strictly to feel loved and feel wanted and feel worthy. But now I'm realizing that that desire for validation was coming from a place of disconnection. And now that I have found a way to open up vulnerably and connect to the world around me and the people around me, I don't need that ego inflation anymore. So I can be the guide for somebody else simply because I care about the community that I'm a part of and the relationships and connections that I'm trying to build. So it's the same actions, but the fuel behind the action becomes completely different when you realize these dark places that need for validation can come from.
I love it. I think we got time for a few more questions, hopefully. But I asked you, I kind of ran off a little short list of all the things you've done, from a combat vet to general contractor, electrician, author, coach. You're coaching coaches now, podcast host, entrepreneur. Most fulfilling out of all of those?
So far, probably the coaching. I have really fallen, and not mentoring coaching. Like I do like teaching and I like mentoring, but there's something about sitting down with a client and watching and empowering them to knock down their own barriers and their own hurdles. Like, it's something that has really struck a chord with me lately is my desire to be a father. Like, I don't have a partner right now and I don't have kids, but I'm realizing more and more that's why I was put here. Is I want more than anything to foster the next generation. And coaching for me is like, in small part, that it allows me to flex that masculine muscle of being like a strong presence for somebody else while they forge their own path, not knocking the walls down for them, but standing there next to them and saying, hey, I've got your back. I believe in you. You can do this. And then watching them live up to their fullest potential, like that to me is the most rewarding thing that I can possibly do.
Oh, I love it. Well, coaching is that's my jam. So I know I don't have enough time to spend talking about coaching, because we can go for hours doing that. Let's try to do that one offline, because I got so many things I want to talk about coaching. I love talking coaching to a coach. That means so much to me, because I'm a coach myself. Been a coach I'm going into year 30 now. So I love the conversations and stuff. So that's great. So we're going to go ahead and pivot for time purposes. You wrote a book called Sincerely America. In short, without revealing too much of the book, what are you saying to America, brother?
That's a good question. Nobody's ever asked it that way before. That you are seen, that you are not carrying this pain or suffering alone, that somebody sees you, somebody understands what you're going through, and that there are people out there who understand what you're going through, is essentially the basis of the book.
Perfect. Great answer, man. I think this would be the next, either the last or next to last question. I have so many. One of the things that I think I pull from what I learned and researched about you is what happens when people are not in touch with their identity and they get stuck in what they call an identity crisis. Frame for us what you believe an identity crisis actually is, and what kind of advice would you give to somebody who's experiencing that, just watching us today?
That's a great question. The reason that I call myself an identity transformation coach is I have realized that identity is the foundation of all behavioral and motivational change. That's because all identity is the story that we tell ourselves about where we've come from and where we're going. But that story includes a lot of things that don't belong to us. So the things that our parents put into us, the trauma that we've experienced throughout our development, the unconscious behaviors that guide our day to day and end up leading us down paths we don't want to walk down, and then the silent beliefs that we hold that end up being the walls in front of us that prevent us from getting to where we're trying to go. And what I see more often than not is the people who are stuck in those identity crises they're not willing to let go of that narrative because their ego needs the security of knowing who they are and how they're supposed to show up in the world. Because transforming that identity requires you to let go of those old narratives to make room for this new story to be told. But that's a very scary thing to do, because when you let go of that and you admit, like, it's for those of you who are religious out there, when you like surrender to a higher power, when you surrender to God, that's one of the scariest things in the world, because you're essentially saying, I can't do this on my own. I don't have control. And the ego does not like to admit that it is not in control. But that's the first step of letting go of that old narrative, is saying, like, hey, I've been doing this on my own for so long, but it's not working and I need help. But for some reason, we as humans do not like to admit that we need help with things.
I love it, man. All right. This is going to be a two-part question. I'm going to ask you this question. No, it's not a two-part question. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to have you speak to our audience for about 120 seconds. Give whatever advice you feel relevant to this. Those that are listening. My question for you, before you do that, is you live in the Charleston, South Carolina area. What does Charleston represent for you in a phrase or two? What does Charleston mean for you?
Charleston, to me, represents rebirth. I'm actually originally from Connecticut, and part of my oh, nice, yeah, and part of me transforming my own identity, I had to put distance in between myself and the old environments and the people that informed who I used to be. So I moved down to Charleston for a fresh start, to be reborn. And that was a necessary part of that process to establish who I was as an individual before I then re-engaged with those old relationships and those old environments. So yeah, Charleston to me represents rebirth.
I love it. I hear that very, very often. That's powerful, man. Talk to the folks that are watching, listen, share whatever you want to share, and let folks know where they can find you and your work, man. Go ahead.
Sure. I guess if you take anything away from this conversation, it's you are not the only one facing whatever it is that you're facing. And I don't care how unique or abstract of a situation you think you are in. There is dozens of other people out there who can sympathize and empathize with what you're going through, and you do not have to navigate whatever you're going through alone. And I'm not even saying that from a coaching perspective. I'm just saying that from a community perspective. Leaning on one another and relying on one another is our superpower. We don't have to carry all this stuff around by ourselves. But if for some reason that does look like coaching to you, then please reach out to me. Like, I specialize in shadow work and identity transformation, especially if you're in the Charleston area. I love working with people face to face. You can go to theinitiationsource.com. That's my coaching website. If you're interested in the book, go to benjaminjohnlee.com. And if you just want to reach out and talk, if you just need somebody to talk to, hit me up on Instagram. You can find me at benjamin.john.lee. And like, I always respond. I will always make time to help other people. So even if that doesn't look like coaching, please reach out. I'd love to talk.
Love it, sir. Lead coaching coordinator for the College of Charleston Coaching Center, the founder of the Initiation Source, and identity transformation coach, Benjamin John Lee. Pleasure to meet you, man. Pleasure to have this time to pick your brain and hear from you. Hope we get to do that more offline. You're a fascinating guy, man. Thanks for being here and doing this, brother.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is the Inspiration Station where stories spark action. That's Ben Lee. I'm Mr. U. Have a great day. Thanks for watching and listening.